Good morning, everyone. So good to see everybody. We are going to call to order our Special Education Advisory Panel on March 26, 2025 at 9:32. And at this time, I will ask our co-chair, Christine, to do a quick roll call.
Good morning. Roll call. Let's see. Melissa Bayham. Proxy. Rebecca Beard. Dr. Jeremy Bell. Erin Downing. Dr. Sally Rose Gaglion. Sorry. Thank you. Christy Gonzalez. Rebecca Huff. Brandy Huling. DeJay Clark Jackson. Carolyn Jurish. Latrice LaCour. Ashley McReynolds. Angela Miles. Dr. Donna Reno. Julia Tanner. Michael Thompson. Jessica White. Aveda Willis. We should have a quorum.
Thank you. So before we move through our agenda this morning, just want to recognize a couple of folks in attendance this morning. Dr. Chasson, our Deputy Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, is joining us. Multiple members of our special education team here as well, and certainly want to welcome all of the public members that we have here today. I know it is certainly a busy time of year, lots of things happening across the street as well, legislatively that many of our advocacy groups are very involved in. So we welcome you all spending some time with us this morning. And it's also very appropriate. We meet every year in Developmental Disabilities Month, and so really appropriate month for us to have a seat meeting in, celebrating our kids, our families, and the educators and professionals that support them each and every day. I do feel like it's been a long time since we've been together as a panel. I do apologize. You know, we had, wasn't just a snow day, it was really a snow week. And so I hope that everyone got to enjoy some excitement there and enjoy that with your families and your kids as well. But we're extremely happy to be back and do some really important work with you all this morning. And Mr. Morris wanted me to send his regrets. He's joining us as our new Bessie co-chair, but he is already had a prior engagement planned and is out actually traveling the state and visiting some of our school systems this week and today, and so was unable to join us. So let's go ahead this morning and move through our agenda for our public folks joining us. If you haven't already and you would like to pick up a comment card, they're the blue comment cards on the table. And if you'll just hand them to one of our team members, they'll get them to us. And we also have a specific public sign-in as well. So this morning, we really have three items of business. We'll approve our minutes from November the 12th. We'll move through three really important items. First are proposed revisions to Bulletin 1508, which is our pupil appraisal handbook. And then we will talk through our draft IDA grant application. I know we've gotten some input from the panel already, but we kind of want to give you an update on where we are in that process and submission. And what we know right now about our IDA funding, and then we will round out our agenda with a discussion around the last audit report around seclusion and restraint, and abuse, mistreatment of children with disabilities in public schools. I know we've talked about that in a couple of public forums, but certainly wanted to bring that to this group as well. And we will need a motion for our first item is approval of the minutes for the meeting held November the 12th.
Can I have a motion? And a
Ashley.
second?
Thank you. Ashley McReynolds made the motion, and the second was Julie Tanner.
Okay, for the next item, we're going to look at the new business. And
Was there any opposition to that motion?
any opposition, excuse me.
We're good. Seeing none, we'll move to our next item. We don't have any public comment on our minutes, and we will move to the next item.
All right, so for our new business, I need to, the first thing is a motion for revision, to discuss the revisions for the Bulletin 1508. Second? Okay, Ms. Jordan?
Thank you. So I'm happy to walk you all through our proposed revisions to Bulletin 1508 this morning, which really governs how our pupil appraisal teams conduct special education evaluations when we suspect a disability or know of a disability of a student. So having really current updated, these are our child find policies. Having current updated child find policies and evaluation procedures is really crucial for ensuring that all of our students who are suspected of having a disability or have a disability are identified early, qualify for any early intervention, and receive all of the services and supports that they need that give them that access. Access to high quality teaching and learning, access to a general education, and access to all of those related services that support them in that success. If you all remember, as a panel, we addressed, some of you remember, we addressed maybe 2 to 3 years ago, the only thing that we've really done in Bulletin 1508 in the past couple of years is when we updated our visual impairment criteria. Outside of that, we haven't really dug into 1508, and this is one of our last special education policies that we haven't touched in the last 4 years since I've been here and with this administration. So it was certainly time. I'll say perfection has been a process with 1508. It was not something that we rushed through. This was not in response necessarily to any legislative direction, but just making sure that we had really current child find procedures and that they're working for our students and for our families in our state. Just a reminder, there are some things that we can accomplish and have state-specific policy, but of course, everything in 1508 also has to align with IDEA. So we kept that in mind as we engaged with and worked with stakeholders in getting just really an array of input on any revisions, any technical edits or clarity that we wanted in 1508. Many perspectives, many experts have really helped to shape these recommended changes over about a 6-month at least period of time. We engaged relevant stakeholders in adaptive PE, in assistive technology, occupational physical therapy, school health services, our social worker group, mental health services, speech language pathology, ed diagnosticians, school psychologists. So all of those professionals, experts, related service personnel that are really vital to 1508 and our evaluation processes. We certainly asked them to either join those collaborative meetings or even having some one-on-one specific OT meetings or PT stakeholder meetings to really dig into those specific sections. And while our work groups really consisted of a lot of professionals, clinicians in the field, we certainly recognize the importance of all voices, and certainly why we wanted to also bring these here to SEEP as well. Um, as we looked at 1508, what I did was, so you all have a printed copy of this as well. It is a lot of language. 1508 is a heavy bulletin. And so we certainly wanted to also provide you a written copy in addition to what we posted publicly. But what I've done was really gone through and pulled out some of those high leverage changes that remove some possible challenges and burdens for our pupil appraisal teams, support clarity for our teams, allow them to make those identifications work more smoothly through the pupil appraisal processes. So I'll go through these, and then of course we can entertain discussion and any questions as well. So one suggestion that we received to add to qualified examiners in 1508 was to add licensed specialists in school psychology, licensed psychologists with school specialty. And so really a significant allowability for our school systems, our school psychologists to work with other professionals in that field to help them do those evaluations more succinctly, more timely, even I think will help with that, with performing those evaluations in a more timely fashion if they have that added capacity. We also, within section 721, worked with our speech pathologists as well and added speech pathology assistants to also be able to help with some of those screenings, some of those assessments as well when it comes to speech. And so that was something that they recommended to really add to their capacity and allow them to conduct those evaluations and have additional personnel as qualified examiners and on their pupil appraisal teams to help them build that capacity. And so the second piece, and this has really always been the case, has really been clearly communicated to states by the U.S. Department of Ed, that evaluations should not be delayed or denied solely based on a tiered intervention system when you suspect a disability. But we wanted to, and in hearing from stakeholders, from parents as well, wanted to add that statement very succinctly. I think we added that to section 301. Many of our school systems also currently do this, but we also added very succinctly that a comprehensive evaluation should consider any suspected delays, additional disabilities, or exceptionalities based on any referral data or any information that we have. Really understanding that our pupil appraisal teams, our evaluation teams are looking at all of those concerns in totality and how they impact that student success in education, in their education environments throughout the day. So we added a couple of really clarifying statements, but I think statements that are really impactful and some things that we've heard from stakeholders and parents that they really wanted some clarity on in policy. This next one I want to talk through is a clarification, but we believe that it's an important one. And really needed clarification in connection to our best instructional practice across our state, and really elevating and continuing to elevate that our students with disabilities have to have access to high quality teaching and learning. And so we worked with our team, worked with our stakeholders to update the definition and description of response to intervention to really try to add clarity on what is high quality intervention, what do we know about gap closing practices for students with disabilities to, as quickly as possible, bring them closer to or bring them to grade level reading, grade level mathematics. And so that was one of the actual first opportunities that we've taken in policy to really codify some of those best practices and really clarify best practice intervention for our students with disabilities. And really, you'll notice several places where we really clarified and added and didn't take for granted, didn't want to take for granted that, well, people know that students with disabilities need access to um, the general education curriculum and really making that very evident in the language in 1508. And so you'll see that added in several different places, just to reiterate that the foundation is that general education and making sure that our students are accessing that and performing um, to to um, to meet their success. So a couple of more that I want to talk through. Our school psychologist gave us some really valuable input on updating the language around autism, really aligning with the most current terminology and how we know that disability manifests. That's section 701. Another disability-specific update that we made was around some mental health diagnoses, specifically mood and anxiety disorders that are making it clear that those areas are more appropriately addressed under the disability category of emotional disturbance. And so making sure that students are identified, because there's can be a little bit of overlay with emotional disturbance or their health impairment, but making sure that our teams know exactly where to identify and how to identify certain disorders and in what disability category. We also updated policy language on reevaluations for all related services. This is something that we have heard from stakeholders. I do think that many of our school systems do conduct reevaluations and review all current data, all current performance before they exit a student for services, but we made that really clear in policy and added that requirement. That's something that we have heard from stakeholders, something that we have heard from parents, that in order to exit from a particular related service, that there should be a relook at the data and a reevaluation conducted. We also updated language, and this is based on feedback that we have heard and just experience over the past couple of years, and really knowing and understanding reevaluations, the processes that we use in Louisiana. So we updated the language based on our stakeholder feedback that reevaluations should not go through 2 consecutive evaluation cycles. So we have to conduct reevaluations every 3 years. And so we should not go through 2 cycles of reevaluations without some current data or assessments, unless the parent says, no, I don't want any additional assessments. I don't believe that's needed for my student to continue services. We think everything is okay. We can continue to set accurate and appropriate goals, but we really want to discourage a 6-year cycle, essentially, where there hasn't been any updated data. And really particularly, we've looked at this around, and we've talked with you all around alternate assessment, right? And when we are trying to figure out, does this student qualify for regular assessment, alternate assessment, and the data that we're looking at is 6 years old, 9 years old, it would be really helpful to have updated data when we're making those decisions as pupil appraisal teams. So we did add that piece, and just really knowing we can't remove that request from a parent, right? That to say, I don't want any additional assessment on my reeval. We're okay. We're good. Let's move on. But as best practice for our pupil appraisal teams, we wanted to put that language in there, of course, unless the parent requests that. We have now state law requirements around dyslexia screening, additional assessments if students score at risk. We know we have an obligation to identify dyslexia under specific learning disability and support those students. Our work groups really, and our pupil appraisal teams really suggested and really requested aligning Bulletin 1903, adding some additional information around identifying dyslexia within 1508. And so we did reference Bulletin 1903 in those required educational screenings. It's now a required kindergarten screener for dyslexia, and of course, any other time that dyslexia is suspected. And so we added some additional evaluation considerations under specific learning disability categories. So it was already listed in 1508. Dyslexia was listed there under specific learning disability. And so what we did was we added an additional consideration for our pupil appraisal teams to review a preponderance of evidence is the wording that we used. All of those screenings, all of those evaluations, additional assessments, and look for some additional criteria to see if that team wanted to indicate dyslexia within that IEP under specific learning disability. And so there are a couple of other states who are in the same position that we are, have a lot of state legislation around dyslexia, around required screenings, around additional assessments. And so it makes a lot of sense for us to connect Bulletin 1903 and 1508, make those processes work together. We are still supporting our school systems on this, supporting school building level committees and pupil appraisal teams on what this looks like. We've had quite a bit of dyslexia legislation over the past couple of years. And so we have made a couple of policy shifts over the past couple of years. And so it takes support, I think, to get our school building level committees, our pupil appraisal teams to that level of what does this identification look like, right? And so we can talk, a little bit more about that as well. Another shift that removes some burden for pupil appraisal teams is a shift from accepting, in previous language in 1508, pupil appraisal teams could only accept doctor's diagnoses and notes from our adjacent states. And so we opened that up and said any doctor's note from any state in the United States. And so I think that is going to release a burden from our pupil appraisal teams, from our parents, right? So when that pupil appraisal team has to go to a parent and say, I can't accept your doctor's note, I need you to go to another local doctor, pay another copay, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that releases a burden on everyone's part there. We also had quite a few technical edits that you will see. We did have a little bit that's tied to certification and some prior state legislation. So instead of certified school nurses, we just say registered nurse. So our schools have to employ registered nurses. And we also repealed any references to appendices or attachments that aren't actually attached to the bulletin and haven't been in a very long time. We do support our school systems, for example, like functional vision assessments. We will provide our school systems and pupil appraisal teams resources if they need additional resources or access to some of those assessments or checklists. But in terms of policy, state policy, sticking to policy language and not having really bulky appendices. We haven't done that in years, but there were a lot of references still there that said, see appendix whatever for a certain checklist that were never there. And so it will ease, I think, our school systems from looking to us, where's this checklist that's supposed to be? Well, we haven't had that in years. So we made a lot of technical edits that you'll see. And so I'll kind of stop here. I think those were kind of some of the big sort of high impact, high leverage edits here. Again, anything that we had to do had to also align to IDA. So it was a real positive experience working alongside all our pupil appraisal staff, all of the related services staff. Of course, it takes time when you engage that level of stakeholders, but we weren't on a time clock for 1508 or a legislative mandate, but it was certainly a bulletin that we wanted to do a nice run through to see what else do we think needs to be updated here. And this isn't to say that we can't come back and do more. You all know when there's a need, we will make policy shifts if we need to. We did not touch really the gifted and talented section, so I think that is something possibly that we may bring back to you all in the future. We are considering a gifted and talented work group to kind of help us look at gifted and talented policy, look at guidance there and see what else we would like to do. So there is a piece of 1508 that is specific to gifted and talented that you won't see a lot of revision or suggestions on, but that's certainly something that I feel like we could, we will likely bring to you in the future as an additional update. And I'll kind of pause here and we can have any discussion, questions. Go ahead, Ash.
Um, so I think overall, these are all amazing. I really appreciate the specific language around RTI. There are districts across the state that have specific schools in them that principals just are refusing a special education evaluation until these kids go through all of these RTI tiers. So I really do appreciate that, and I hope that can alleviate sort of that practice. I'm glad to see the dyslexia. I know we talked about that a couple of seat meetings ago, and I think that was all I had. Yeah, I think that's all I had.
I'll go ahead and give my kudos to this body and the department for helping us champion adding dyslexia as an option for identification in the IEP, which is a huge victory in that. There is under the SLD section, so there are a number of things that still need to be worked through, but I'll point out one area is that I noticed that we shifted the language from low achievement to weakness, which I highly agree with because that left for interpretation. But if we can continue that consistency throughout that SLD section, there's still some areas that say low achievement.
Perfect. Yep, we can catch those. Yeah, and I appreciate that, Dejanay. We actually, most of you all know, we went through a U.S. Department of Ed monitoring visit, and one of their very specific questions was, how do you identify students with dyslexia? And so it really did solidify for us that we needed to make the connections, right, between our dyslexia handbook and our pupil appraisal handbook. And so it was very obvious to us at that point that it was something that we were expected to do as states, is to know how you identify dyslexia, because it's a national conversation. States are talking about it. There are a lot of other states that have come along as well with state laws around dyslexia identification as well.
Actually did have one more. Under emotional disturbance, y'all specifically identify schizophrenia. And I'm wondering if that's going to be, so like if an individual has, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, still going to exhibit. I'm wondering if by identifying just schizophrenia, if you don't have the diagnosis of schizophrenia, if they wouldn't qualify under emotional disturbance when it might be the best fit for them. So maybe just add some language that says include schizophrenia, but not limited to,
Includes,
or
but not limited to.
something like that. Because if you only identify that one, I feel like they would, if you don't come in with schizophrenia, but have maybe personality disorder or bipolar, something like that, that they would look past that because it only identifies schizophrenia.
Any other comments on this section?
I have a question about Chapter 11, Section 1103. That is noted as repealed for the parent consent for reevaluations. Can we talk about how that looks differently for the reeval process and where that language may have gone? I would assume that there's a reason why that was repealed, maybe to be positioned differently within the document.
Yep, I think because it's elsewhere. Which specific portion are you on? You said Chapter
1103. 1103.
1103.
This section, second from the bottom.
Yep.
And it's important to note that this is a thick document, but this isn't all of 1508. Like, this is just a portion of showing the revisions.
Exactly.
It's a significantly larger document.
Significantly. I'll pull it up. Literally all we repealed was it said, see section 109 regarding parental consent. So because it was elsewhere and it was this little minimal comment, so the parental consent piece is still in section 109. You got it. A great question.
Any other comments?
Yes, yes. They could be selected, but in whatever additional data that you're considering, that there should be some new assessments done. I don't know if Christine, you want to explain that better? Or... Mhm, mhm. It doesn't prescribe what assessments you have to do. Yeah. And because that really depends on the student.
Yeah.
But we just don't want you to go 6 years with no additional.
And I think it just is leading you to, of course, having those conversations with the team of that child, like the teacher, the current teacher, maybe even the parent, doing those interviews first, and then letting that lead you to what assessments might be needed to get more information of that current performance of that child. So if you did ed testing, 6 years ago, how is that child functioning now in those same areas might be where it leads you. So do you repeat the same assessment? Those are all things, that I think it opens it up for consideration to help that team, that IEP team, know more about that child to make those decisions for the new evaluation. Yes. Possibly, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think several years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, we had an exceptional team of school psychologists that worked on our reevaluation data review process. And really the goal was to avoid overly using those parent waivers, or just saying, hey, we're at our 3 years, mom, dad, legal guardian, I need you to sign here. And so I don't think it's happening really widely, because of that process. I think is one that really requires our teams to go through and review all current data. But then you could still, and that team could very well say there are no more assessments needed. The parent could say, I don't want any more assessments, even though it's been 3 years, even though it's been 6 years or 9 years. Like, the parent totally has that right. But we would certainly try to avoid that, just as a best practice, like at least on that second time, grabbing some additional achievement or academic or cognitive data. As determined by we could say
Maybe some language that says that the type of assessment is determined by the team. And because I think, we're just trying to be careful that we still get that same point across of, some kind of assessment needs to occur. Maybe if we just put some language that says,
yep. Which parts or what's relevant. We could add some language around, like, as determined by the team, if that's something you guys all feel would be helpful. Yeah, we can kind of finesse that with something around as determined by the team. Part of that team is the parent, and so of course the parent would still have the option to say, no more, I don't want any assessments. We don't have to move forward with any assessments. Can add that.
any other comments?
And we have no public comment.
No
on this
public
item.
comment?
I'm going to
Okay.
double check them.
So do I have a motion to accept these changes? A second?
Do you all, you could, at your will, make an endorsement of these policy changes with the noted changes. Okay, so we have a motion from Ashley McReynolds.
Do we have a second to endorse?
Who was our second? Brandy Hewling was our second. Okay, great.
Okay, that'll lead us to our next section of informational reports. For the first one, we're going to be looking at the fiscal year 25 IDEA grant application.
Great. So I wanted to bring you all an update here, just kind of around where we are in the process of applying for our next round of state IDEA funding. And as we lead into that work, this is, to me, the perfect, most appropriate time, because all of our funding, our spending, all of those things should really drive us toward our priorities, our goals, and increased outcomes for kids with disabilities. And so I haven't shared this yet with on this platform with particularly our SEAT panel. Of course, had a wonderful celebration planned while we were all playing in the snow for January. But I think this is still, even though you might have seen this, I have certainly shared it on other state councils and platforms. For example, with our Developmental Disabilities Council, we talked about this a lot and the results that we're seeing for our students. But I think it is certainly extremely relevant for us to bring here to you all and start this conversation about where we should go, what we should spend our funding on around the results that we're seeing for students with disabilities in our state. And so as many of you may have seen, we recently received our nation's report card, which is really sort of the gold standard across the country and lets stakeholders, all of our states, parents, families really know how each state is measuring up to other states in the country in ELA and math, specifically around 4th grade and 8th grade reading and math. And it is so incredibly exciting. There is so much gratitude, I think, and appreciation that is due to all of the people in this room, our students, their parents, our educators, all of the professionals that support our kids every single day, all of the agencies who provide supports for us as a department and for our kids and their families in order to access high quality education and high quality teaching and learning, and to really believe in what our kids can do. And really, really remarkably and incredibly, our kids with disabilities in Louisiana outperformed all other students with disabilities across the country in both reading and math. In growth and in straight performance, our kids are performing higher. And so there is nothing shy of, number one, what our kids are absolutely capable of doing. Two, their parents and families who are their first teachers, the people who are supporting them every single day. And then, of course, our educators who are actually making this data actually happen each and every day. So you can see here, this is the growth chart. The teal is the Louisiana data, and then the purple are all other students with disabilities across the country. So you can see 4th grade math, our kids grew 7%, while across the country, kids with disabilities remain stable. In 4th grade reading, kids in Louisiana, our students with disabilities increased 13%, and across the country, students with disabilities fell 1% in 4th grade reading. 8th grade math, our kids increased 4% across the country. Kids with disabilities fell 4%. Same thing with 8th grade reading. Our kids increased 4% and across the country fell 4%. And so our kids with disabilities in Louisiana aren't just barely outperforming. They're not just performing like all other kids. They're significantly outperforming. And there's so much work that is a testament to this. And I think when I talk about this data, I just get so incredibly proud and incredibly honored to be able to do this work, lead this work in our state, and work with every single person in this room and across our state to make sure this continues to happen. The next particular slide is, I just showed you the growth slide, the scale scores. So this is absolute performance, and you can see that our kids in Louisiana with disabilities outperformed just straight performance, scale score performance, all other students across the country. And so just really incredible, the performance. And I think just the ability, right? We always focus on the ability and what our kids could do. We have always known that they could perform, and I know that we will continue this work. This panel has been paramount in endorsing so many policy shifts that have impacted this. So much more access for our parents, for our families, for our kids. Early what we just accomplished, making sure that we're identifying students, serving them quickly with early intervention, and getting them access to high quality general education. Our best practice work that this panel adopted, I guess, 3 years ago now, and said, yes, we believe this is how we move forward. This is true inclusion in our state, and true access to high quality teaching and learning in our state. All of those things, I know together is leading and impacting this work. The work in our state, the real intense support around literacy, making sure that our students with disabilities also learn how to read. They can and should. The foundational mathematics work that we are doing as a state right now, I think is we're already seeing impacts from that, and we'll continue to see that. And this will simply trickle, right? As our kids progress through school, I think we will see more middle schoolers, more high schoolers who get to those grade levels as well, ready to learn and on grade level. We've talked about this, but just want to bring it back to also our state level data. You know, all of these data points, I will be very honest with you, I wasn't sure, I didn't know that our students were going to surpass as far as they did all other students in the country, but it is consistent with what we have seen on state assessments as well. So every year for the past 3 years, our students with disabilities have grown at least 1% in mastery. Even our students with significant disabilities, we just submitted our latest federal reporting in February. I'll bring that additional data to you all. I usually bring it to you in the summer as we plan for the next year. Even our students on Assess with Leap Connect, we have more students proficient on Leap Connect than we've ever had. We've just reported our students with disabilities suspension and expulsion rates have gone down in our state. Is it still happening? Are there still things that we need to support and push on? Sure. But really a lot of consistent data that are pointing to our students with disabilities really moving in the right direction. And so I want us to really talk about where we are with our grant application, how that ties into our funding priorities, what are the things that we have to fund, and what are some things, I did already get feedback from you all at a previous meeting about what are some things that you all would like to see, and I'll kind of talk about that and talk through it. So all of our priorities that really stand up our special education work, I want you to keep in mind. Keeping those high quality instructional best practices in mind. How do we make sure that kids with disabilities are getting access to high quality teaching and learning, just like all other students? Have access to tutoring experiences at school. Have access to high quality intervention. Keep that piece in mind. How we support educator development. We spend a large portion of our budget on building professional capacity and providing professional development and support to the field. I like to take a lot of our state level funding and put it back into our schools with real intentional pieces around professional development and building the capacity of our educators to support our students. So that's a real big piece of what stands up our work. Is all of the professional development that allows us to implement best practice. Stakeholder engagement, of course, continuing strong partnerships with our families, how we support our families, how we support all of our stakeholders to help us stand up this work. Our results are not the work of one person, not even one office in this agency. We have all worked together really to prioritize our students and to prioritize this work. And so how we engage with all of our stakeholders is really, really important. And then lastly, that program compliance piece, we'll talk about what are some of the things that we must fund around compliance support with our funding that also helps us stand up our program statewide and administer these grant funds statewide. So there are some necessary activities. You all have a draft copy. I will tell you that we have not received our latest allocation funding sources. It will come hopefully soon, since our application is due in May. But what we were instructed to do by OSIP is to go ahead and plan and draft based on your prior year allocation. We have no indication that our funding, not that it won't, but we have no indication of any serious decreases or any serious impacts to our state level funding. And so we are planning as though we will get at least what we got in the previous fiscal year 24. So there are several necessary activities, for example, monitoring and complaint investigation systems. So we have to administer a monitoring system. We have to administer a special education complaint investigation system. We have to provide the support for any assessment accommodations, can't speak, and implement any alternate assessments that are required by federal law. So we have to administer accessible assessments and make sure that we have any alternate versions for our students with significant disabilities. We also have to employ our staff to provide any assistance, support any LEAs, as we provide technical assistance around special education. And so you will see over the past couple of years those salary amounts, specifically around our monitoring team. As you all know, last legislative session, Dr. Brumley asked for additional positions for our monitoring team. That was feedback that we received from one of our audits from stakeholders. And so there are some additional salary costs now that you will see listed on our grant activities. So those are things that are required. Supporting our assistive technology initiative through the Accessible Educational Materials Center. That is something that we have done for many years now. You will still see it listed. They provide an extremely valuable service in terms of assistive technology devices, providing consults to school systems, doing some assessments with students who have some really specific needs. They support a lending library, and of course will provide other accessible materials and Braille materials as well to students across our state. So they really work for us and provide a service that that they have capacity and expertise to provide to our students statewide. It's extremely valuable. Professional learning opportunities for families, for our educators, and then of course we are required to maintain a special education advisory panel. This is our current timeline. I'll kind of tell you where we are. So we had a public survey that opened in February. We have received, hold on, I have the number, an incredible outreach through that survey, the most this year than I have ever received, over 740 responses to that public survey. And that is because a lot of the people in this room sharing that. Our social media team and comms team did a great job of getting that information out. All of our Developmental Disabilities Council, GOTA, all of those folks have helped us to share that. And so we've gotten an extreme number of stakeholder input, of which I tell you every year that I read all of them, and I'll summarize some of that feedback for you. We have started drafting our application. You will see a draft of it up, as well as the draft pieces. So the pieces that I just shared with you, the handout that you have that kind of list examples of some of those activities, that is not required to go with our application. We just kind of we are required to give OSIP a general idea of how much money we're going to spend in all of those categories. For transparency, I'd like to tell you all what are some of the things, what are some big ticket items that we fund using this money, and of course to get your input on additional pieces that you believe we should fund. We've had some of these conversations. We've gotten some input from you all already, and I'll talk to you about where some of that is reflected in activities and in plans coming up. On March 18th, we did post, we have a 60-day public comment period that is required by OSIP, which is very interesting because you're essentially making public comment on a draft. and we don't have the allocation yet. But as soon as we do, we'll update any funding, and we'll repost that draft application. But all of this period also counts as that 60-day public comment period. So I have the link here for that public comment that anyone can go and submit any comment on our application. We will make final revisions as those comments come in. The public comments are also summarized. These public comments, not our stakeholder input. That's a process that I like to use because this application isn't my application. This is our state's. This is our application. This is our students' funding, right? But the public comments that's required by the 60-day period, those are summarized and added to our application right before we submit. We'll make final revisions throughout April and early May, and then on May 21st, we will submit that application to receive our state level funds. Now, what you don't see on here, there are a lot of places in there where you notice there are funds going back to school systems, but this funding, we don't have to apply for our, that's the flow through money that goes to school systems. So school systems also get IDA allocations based on their child count. This particular application and funding breakdown is for the state level set aside that we get as a state to say, here's how we're going to help administer statewide special education. Here's how we're going to help support LEAs. Here's how we're going to help support families, and do the things that are prioritized by our stakeholders and by this panel. So that's kind of where we are in the timeline. I wanted to give you a little bit of summary on our stakeholder input. 46% of our respondents were parents. Our next highest respondents are always teachers, and our LEA representatives who are telling us what help they need, what assistance they would like to see. The vast majority, overwhelming majority, agreed with those funding priorities that we set out in our application. There were some key themes that we did pull out that I think aren't necessarily, they're tied to our budget, but also tied to program work that we do and supports that we can give that may not cost money, but I think are important to bring out here because stakeholders took time to put those public comments and put those their stakeholder input in. And so there was some comment around April Dunn Act paperwork efficiency, and so we are looking at that. There are some of those things that are in the legislation that we have to do, but what are some ways that we can better help them administer the April Dunn Act, which I think is extremely important, and helping them with different guidance and ways we can do that. And so we will certainly dig into the April Dunn Act, and we've done a lot of work around implementation support, some tools for our school systems to use to say, hey, am I fully implementing April Dunn Act? Where are some places that I need to improve upon? We had several comments around, this was, again, a huge theme around minimizing any paperwork requirements, streamlining special education processes. I know we hear that a lot from families as well. Thinking about state legislative requirements as well, and what some of those requirements are as they come out. And we always try to implement any of those legislative changes as smoothly as possible with our school systems, and provide them guidance that allows them to implement all of those regulations as smoothly and efficiently as possible. Redundant data entry, so we're going to take a look at that. Specifically, we have reached out to all of the folks who left some really specific comments. Like for some of these, we may need more information to know exactly, hey, how can we better help in this area? And so I've reached out to a lot of those folks to just really kind of better understand what would make this work easier. Because I think at the end of the day, this is about making sure our kids get the services and supports they need as efficiently as possible. And we should be here to help do that. And then, of course, we had a lot of respondents who saw no specific needs in the paperwork reduction piece. But it is a question that we ask every year because it's on it's on our application. And so much of what we do in Louisiana is already electronic. We already have a statewide IEP and special education reporting system. And I sometimes forget that there are other states that are still not electronic. And so I think some of those sections are to try to move states to a more efficient electronic process for special education and for housing records, and just consistency and ease of transitioning students across districts even. And so it's something that we still ask that question, trying to really understand what more can we do around paperwork reduction in our state. The next one, we found several key themes around additional funding opportunities with April Dunn Act implementation support. And we do have, and that is currently in an activity that we do with our state set-aside funds, is to support implementation and provide technical assistance to school systems, specifically on the April Dunn Act implementation. Any additional related services supports, again, I think some of the work that we just did in Bulletin will help some of this, but we certainly have LEAs, asking us any additional support around related services, and finding and recruiting additional providers is going to be helpful. So that's something that we're looking at as well for next year. Professional development to build the capacity of professionals. And so I think that is really where we could spend a little bit of time if y'all have any additional feedback. I'll tell you some things that we have gotten feedback on and that we have either recently rolled out or plan to roll out. We recently released a set of statewide modules by the National LRP Group. They're a widely recognized national organization around special education processes, compliance. We rolled out a suite of, I think, 17 modules that our school systems and our teams can use with, honestly, special educators. If they also have general educators, regular educators who are supporting students with disabilities, I would really recommend also, when necessary and when appropriate, using those modules for those educators and professionals as well. And so that was a piece of feedback that we have heard, that there were some compliance modules also needed out there in addition to a lot of the work our team does around instructional practice as well. And so, certainly, we'll kind of pause here, see if there are any additional things that you would like to see, or if you have any questions about some of the activities that are listed. Again, it's in draft, can still make adjustments through May as well. But just know that, again, we have to provide them with our funding amounts, how much we're going to spend in those big buckets, but really we are also expected to be, throughout the years and throughout next year, responsive to student needs, responsive to our community's needs, and we don't have to be locked in. I like to share with you, for transparency's sake, what are some of those activities. But certainly we can be responsive and do some additional things with our state level funding as well.
I have a question. Well, before I get into the question, I really appreciate the emphasis on professional development, on education and educating our educators. I think I counted the word families in there 7 times or so. So there is an emphasis on acknowledging and supporting our families through that, which is, we know is a big need. And it's sort of, this professional development seems to be woven into all areas. Because we know that when we build knowledge, we build capacity, we empower, and then we don't have to put as much emphasis on the compliance part because we've built that awareness. And hopefully you all are thinking through creative ways to utilize those professional development dollars. I heard you say modules. We know that our educators are sort of burnt out on online learning. And so those opportunities to really get into districts in front of those educators and leadership to ensure that that connection is made with the education and the implementation. So I just want to emphasize that. So thank you for your focus on that. My question is around on page 3 for that capacity building. you all specifically note autism and medical needs as an area. Did that derive from that focus feedback in terms of naming those groups? I only ask because I am concerned about being boxed in and being responsive, like you said, to all of what is happening in real time.
Yeah, it really is based on feedback, and we actually are doing some real specific sessions this summer at Teacher Leader as well around autism, and supporting those behaviors because we've heard that feedback. Absolutely. We also have a couple of uh, partnerships with one, for example, is I'm going to say the wrong hospital. But we have a partnership with a hospital who provides some training on like complex medical needs. And so that you'll see reflected in here as well. But honestly, Dejanay, I mean, whatever additional pieces we also need development on, we can add that. Like if there's any additional real specifics that you want to call out here, we certainly could.
And I fully support those two areas.
Yeah.
Just wanted to emphasize the opportunity to broaden it, especially around social emotional learning, mental health and behavior, which are all those secondary consequences for our students.
Absolutely. We are actually, haven't listed it on here yet, but we are in some conversation about some potential statewide training around that. So I like to sort of lift burdens as much as I can to make things more accessible for our school systems when we can. And so if there's some things that we can fund and we feel are priority as a state level, we can certainly work out some statewide training that then they don't, it's more accessible. It's really easier for them to say, yes, we want to tap into that opportunity. And really, everything that we've heard from stakeholders, feedback that we've got, I just didn't, even the LRP modules, honestly, like that came from stakeholder feedback. Some of the topics that we released are topics that have been covered in some of our audits. And I didn't realize how well it was going to be received by our districts to just say, hey, like we need some of these refresher compliance things out there so that when people, we onboard new people or they're all doing professional learning plans throughout the year, there are cycles of learning that they can assign to their staff as they see needed. And so sometimes, I really thrive on what you all have to say because, I'm not thinking of everything all day, every day. And so I think hearing it from you all and knowing what's needed, if I can provide it statewide and we have the funding, I think it makes it easier for our LEAs.
I have a question. Are these dollars specific to K-12 or are there opportunities for universities? Because what I'm saying, working in schools is the pipeline for new educators, making sure that we have opportunities to develop people who are interested in maybe coming into education, and that's been concerning for me. Being a director of special education, like not seeing new people coming into the field.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's some things that we can do around recruitment. I know in the past couple of years, we haven't used IDEA funding in the past few years to address some of the recruitment piece. We actually invested some of our state's ESSER dollars, which we don't have those any longer, but we used ESSER dollars to provide additional funding to school systems to recruit additional folks who may have interest in special education, for example, but didn't have that certification add-on that they could then go and pay for those costs and get some additional people and use that as a recruiting tool. And so it's certainly possible. That's also the thought around the related services piece as well. We actually hear it even more, honestly, for the related services shortages. But it's certainly something that we could think about, what specifically are the needs. I do hear of needs around individuals to support students with significant disabilities, still, that, you know, there has to be such a love and you just don't find, that's not, you don't have a lot of people going into universities right now, to engage in that work and to teach those students. And so that could be an area too, that I've, based on feedback and conversation, that there's a need there for students with significant disabilities too.
Just to piggyback off of that, I've talked about for years working with Board of Regents and our higher ed officials to develop a dual, when you're in college, you come out ready for regular education and special education. There are so many states that do it, and the benefit it has is tremendous for ones that just want to teach regular ed but are going to have kids with disabilities in their class. They're familiar. I don't want to say they're 100% comfortable, but they have some experience with how to write an appropriate IEP, how to handle some things. I think it's something that Louisiana should really look at and shift to address the shortage that we have around special education. Back to the IDEA thing, just looking at the drop, not that it's a terrible, but the drop from 4th grade to 8th grade. Do we shift in the calls that I get? I've experienced it personally as a parent. That shift from elementary school to middle school is brutal. Can we shift some of this or put a priority around professional development of middle school? I feel like middle school is like the redheaded stepchild. We focus a lot on elementary and high school. And then there's just this, for parents, for my own child, middle school was like just this pit that was a struggle for everybody. He went from basic scoring and LEAP to unsat. I mean, within like a year. And so I just think that if we could do something around middle school, that would be great.
Yeah, and that's not anything different too than some of the feedback that we've heard too. And we, now all of our special educators now have to take science of reading coursework, as part of their certification and coursework, teacher prep requirements. One of the things that we heard even with that, right? And so that covers K to 3rd grade. But one of the things that we did for the past 2 years, we just cycled everyone through it. We that same suggestion, Ashley, they were like, well, we have students in middle school who are struggling to read. And so we actually used some of our funding to do science of reading for 4 through 8. And we kind of expanded that. But I think to your point, providing additional supports for foundational mathematics support too, and continuing that reading support. And I think we've done so much work in our state, to really focus in on those early literacy skills. I think that we will continue to see the impacts of that now as students get through middle and high school. Hopefully that experience will be a better one as they are better prepared in that grade level content, but certainly something that I think you're right on point. Not something that we haven't heard as well.
Just to add to what she said, and I think with 6th through 8th grade, I currently have a 8th grader myself, and I won't say too much because we're also at that age where I tend to embarrass her more than anything. But what the supports are needed, yes, they need the reading and the math, but if we're going to have that focus on social emotional, that is where we need to focus the most on. I'm not saying that pre-K through 5th grade, because even as a special ed director, I see that we need those supports K through 12. But if we are going to have any focus area to help that pit that they fall into in middle school, it is the social emotional piece. And then off of that, we can build the reading and the math. But I do want to kind of give a shout out to the LRP modules, because as a director, I've used those. And it's not, and I know the online learning, it, we do get tired of that. We have
But
so
they do
much of
make
it.
you engaged too.
But
Yeah.
the thing is that I'm using them and we're doing like IEP workshops. So that's been able to be, so please don't get rid of those, is what I'm saying.
Yes, ma'am.
Or some type of learning for that. Because I've had a lot of my teachers, especially those that are certified teachers, but they're not necessarily certified in special ed, they're utilizing those for the compliance piece or just for learning because they don't know that part of it. And so, like you said, for onboarding, it's been really helpful. A question that I have, and it doesn't have to be answered right here, but for the IEP facilitators on page 1, is that something that you're thinking about doing regional wise? So that, for example, we're smaller districts, but we have an IEP facilitator for the whole district. So then would that be something that she could email, call, have support at the state level?
So those are, Rebecca, those are our state IEP facilitators as part of our dispute resolution process, as
Okay.
part of an option for
Family?
parents and or school systems to
Okay.
say, hey, can you guys come join this IEP with us? We're just having some dispute. We just want somebody to help us navigate and kind of act as a facilitator for an IEP.
Okay.
Yep, those are our state IEP facilitators.
And then my next question on the alternative programming for children with disabilities and the behavioral support. We're finding that when our students are transitioning back from those facilities, whether it's 10 days, 6 months, however long they stay there, the transition part is where we struggle because then they're coming from a facility that was structured, had these supports. They come back into our district and we're struggling to figure out how does that look for them in those classrooms because they do not qualify for alternate assessment, so they can't be in that type of, especially our middle school and high schoolers. Now, elementary is a little different because we have combined rooms, but how do we provide them those supports where they're still gaining access to the curriculum, but they have all the social, emotional, and behavioral concerns?
And sort of those restorative practices.
Right. So if you're thinking along line, I don't know what your thoughts are there for that. I know it's at the state-operated schools, but then how can we, when we're providing those behavioral supports, implement that into the LEAs? Because I feel like sometimes we're failing our students in those areas because they need those behavioral and social supports, but intellectually, they're able to access the curriculum. It's the behaviors.
Yeah, and that's something that we also have a lot of discussion about and hear a lot from stakeholders is just more supports for students with some challenging behaviors and how to best support them so they can be included and have that access. And so that's exciting to hear, right? As you try to transition those kids back, just what are some additional supports? We'll definitely think that through. Rebecca.
I heard you mention, Meredith, possibly looking at like a state level training model around behavior. I'm assuming that would come out of K on page 3. I don't know if it's in here now. If it's not in there now, do we need to look at the amount? Have you thought about it?
I think we have it covered. It's also covered under capacity building too. Right now, the piece for K, remember, we also have a statewide positive behavior consortium. And so we provide funding to lead LEAs, sort of host LEAs, and they provide and either contract with professionals or support individuals for trauma-informed practices, positive behavior supports, how to get a positive behavior system up and running in our school or in our school system. And so we have sort of regionally located throughout the state opportunities where school systems, even around that region, come and join that consortium model to learn more about positive behavior interventions. But that's, I mean, that's one activity that we're doing. That doesn't mean we can't also provide some state level training and modules in a different way too.
Do you think you can just move,
I could
move from
probably,
within? Or
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah, and I can kind of add that there.
okay.
I have a question for the behavioral supports for alternative programming. The the support, is that from the state providing the support? Is that money going to be provided to the LEA to provide that behavioral support?
That actually, Jessica, is a piece that we could actually partner with you all at the Office of Juvenile Justice to give you some additional funding and support, whether it's additional school psychologists, additional social workers, because I know in those particular settings, I know you can speak really specifically to all of your needs, but just having the capacity to also, again, support those students while they're there, that then if and when they go back to a school, that they've had some of that really specific specialized supports that some of them need.
It's definitely needed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have a question on page 1 about the funding for the monitoring, enforcement, and complaint investigation. Is that specific to like compliance around, I guess, documents and things of that matter? And so I wanted to know if there's a process or a way to spend those dollars for preventative and proactive strategies for schools and districts. So this is how you stay out of non-compliance situations. And so that way we're not spending a lot of time, you're not spending a lot of time coming into districts, cleaning up, because that is costly and time consuming. So if we know on the forefront how to not be in those things, then we could spend dollars of being preventative and proactive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of things that we've kind of been talking about are some of those proactive pieces, right? Like some of the capacity building, some of those compliance modules that we released, which really, I think some of our school systems are really enjoying having some of that compliance knowledge, like you said, proactively ahead of time, and something they can use with their teams and their staff. But this particular H is really, that's funding our statewide monitoring team. Much of that is tied up into our monitoring team salaries. Even we added 6 new monitoring team members. So you'll see that number over the past 2 years has really increased. And then our complaint investigators, our dispute resolution coordinator, and we also have on contract some consultants that we can send into school systems to help them when there is noncompliance. And so that is there. And that second piece, so really all of that H is salaries for us to administer that required state monitoring, as well as our complaint investigation pieces. The only piece that I need to add there is our ombudsman piece. But again, even it's a required component, but that's our contracts for our state mediators, our IEP facilitators as part of dispute resolution. Really, H and I are all about the requirements around state monitoring and dispute resolution, all the services that we have to offer to administer these programs statewide. And we'll add our ombudsman as well to I, because she will fall under that piece, establishing and implementing any of our mediation processes. So a lot of those costs are salaries and or contracts to help us support that work. Now the preventative work comes in, which is where you'll see a big chunk of our funding is around how we support personnel, how we build capacity, what those professional development opportunities look like, right? And I don't think I think you're on point that we could offer some of those additional opportunities, that really also focus in on compliance as well.
I was actually happy to see the number lower than some of the other areas, because we know that if we are just emphasizing the compliance part, then we're diminishing the preventative part. So I can appreciate the emphasis on that front-loading knowledge building. But I do have a question about your largest budget line item. You could briefly talk about why we are page 4 in the assessment area. Why is there such an investment in assessment?
So this particular, I was looking at M. Yeah, so they're extremely expensive. All of our, making sure that our state assessments, and now we have multiples, right? We've added some additional statewide assessments as well. And so those particular annual contracts, the way that we work with them to ensure there are accommodations built in that are accessible for our students, just the data warehousing of all of that piece too is extremely expensive. And of course the alternate assessments, which there's no way around that. So for every statewide assessment we have, there has to be an alternate option. And if you're familiar with, for example, the Leap to Connect assessment, right, there are a lot of visuals. And so just administering that, and there's still some paper-based requirements for some of that for some students, and so that requires some additional funding as well. They're just expensive to administer.
I appreciate that explanation, because that is, obviously we'd like to see that poured back into our students, but assessment is a necessary evil.
Meredith, good morning. Back to page 1, you made it very clear about the funding for state mediators and IEP facilitators, but coming from a LEA standpoint, I appreciate the work that has come to fruition for our qualified examiners. Pupil appraisal finally have a voice at the state, and I think directors are very, very grateful for that, and I know that my staff is as well. When we talk about IEP facilitators, I would like to see some consideration given to some professional development for IEP facilitators in the LEAs.
Yeah.
Because that is a very, very heavy lift, and I know for my district, we have a pretty large ESS population, and I have one IEP facilitator, and I was able to, many years ago when I was just a teacher, they had, we were able to also get an IEP specialist who pretty much assists our facilitator. And I spend a good bit amount of time working with my IEP facilitator to try and keep her informed and abreast. And there's a lot of changes that come around the work, and they work very, very hard. And I would like to see our state pushing in some funding for some PDs for the LEAs and IEP facilitators, just as we have for appraisal. And I feel that that has been a really great forward movement for them, and I heavily feel that our IEP facilitators in the LEAs would benefit from some PD from the state
That's
level.
a great, even, Alvat, as you're, I think about all the policy shifts that we've done, that all of those individuals need to be aware of too. Yeah. I think that's a great idea. Those are, yes. So for everything that, not spoken necessarily, but interpreting, and so in any interpreting services that we provide, right? So like we normally have interpreters at SEEP. They're in extreme shortage. Um, we also provide translation. So these are interpreting services. When we provide interpreting services, they are for stakeholders at any public meetings or meetings that we do and events that we have. For example, Teacher Leader Summit is a pretty heavy lift for interpreters. We usually need quite a few, and can get quite costly. For any, you know, parent engagement events that we may do, right, we would want to provide that. So these particular interpreting services, it's an annual contract. We keep them on contract annually. But they are for any stakeholder events that we do and or educators. We are not providing interpreters for like students or, right. Great question. We do. We also have a transition grant that we're working through right now, to create a transition framework for our state. We are working with several pilot LEAs. We're going to kick off, very interesting, you talked about middle school, a middle school to high school transition pilot, and what that transition from middle school to high school should look like. What are best practices for students with disabilities? Because that's a big jump too, from middle to high school. And so, yes, we can and do have transition activities that we can cover. We do fund some of the Jobs for America's Graduate work in our LEAs, as well. Yeah. And if there are any ideas. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we also have plans for, and are planning for a transition website that we will host, and that comes as part of that grant process. And really, the goal of that work is to bring all of those pieces together in a really parent and family friendly way. So I know where are the documents that I need, what are the steps that I need to take, how is LDOE and LEAs working alongside LRS, and how we sort of help families make that connection. So I think that's definitely work that's in progress and coming, and that's certainly important as well.
Just to piggyback off of that, I know it was either here or at one of the DD Council meetings, you and you and Melissa had talked about, I think, some of this pilot work and how she was working to get it into other districts. Is that work continued? Has she been able to make any progress?
All of our pilot districts are required, and it's actually going to be a really critical component of the framework, because in order to have high quality transition services and planning for students, you have to work with LRS. Yes. You have to have a transition champion, I call them, and really helping you figure out programming, building those business connections and community partner connections with you. So I think Melissa has definitely reported many more third-party cooperative agreements,
That's
which is
what it
where LRS, so the LEA takes advantage of that LRS funding, gets their transition champion, and LRS helps to fund that position for the district. And it's really a vital point of success that we've found in the framework of all of this when we release this as sort of a statewide, this is how we should plan for transition for students, is really having that person, and having that person who's making, and the business and community partnerships, who in the community, and how do we train businesses and partners in the community to support our students in the workplace, whether it be entry-level positions, management positions, and so on and so forth. And so that's definitely something that she's reported increased. We required it as part of the pilot work, so they had to get. So there's a natural additional people that LRS has brought on, and I know she's working. She's come and present several times for us with directors, and sharing about that and sharing about the regional offices, how they can get in contact to help support the transition work. And I think there's more work to do for sure.
Thanks.
And I don't, not to cut the budget decision short, but when you start talking about money, we start talking about all the things that we need to do, which is great. No, it's been really good feedback, but I certainly want to allow for enough time for our next item as well and public comments. Anything else?
I know that we do need to move on. Is it okay
okay.
that we email you some questions
For
and
sure.
ideas regarding this?
Absolutely.
Because I was
Absolutely.
just writing,
We're
but I'll be
still
respectful of
drafting.
time.
We're still drafting, so anything can be emailed. You can email me, meredith.jordan@la.gov, as we think about what additional activities that we may want to put.
And
Absolutely.
I do feel that I need to say, I'm very proud to be able to sit here and read this and look at the work that, is being put into making sure that our families, our staff, our LEAs, everybody is really supporting our students with disabilities, because Louisiana has come a long way. And this really warms my heart to be able to read this and see the forward movement that we're making.
Absolutely, and I agree with it. And every decision we make should be helping us drive towards those outcomes that we saw, and doing even more, and giving our students even more abilities.
Okay, so we'll move to the next discussion topic, which would be, oh, I'm sorry, do we have any public comment for?
We don't have any.
Okay, no public comment. Okay, so
Any
yes,
opposition to that item?
any opposition for the IDA grant? Okay. All right, so we'll move forward now to the discussion for the Louisiana Legislative Audit Report, seclusion, restraint, abuse, mistreatment, of children with disabilities in public schools. A motion? Okay, second.
I want to certainly bring this item. I know we have brought this and discussed this item with in a couple of other forums, just because they fell before our seat meeting. Of course, this was on our agenda for the January meeting that also got canceled, but also want to bring this here to this group to also give that platform for any comment and discussion. Before we get started, I did also send and share with members any comments that we got relative to this particular item. That were the only comments that we got, or emails that we got. I've also shared those with our seat members as well, and certainly appreciate everyone who has reached out, also via email, in giving us feedback and giving us thoughts around this particular subject. So I know you may have seen these slides in some form or fashion, but I will go through them and then, of course, open up. And I know we have several public comments on this particular item as well. This particular audit is the third and final. We really approached this collaboration with the LLA, with the legislative auditors, our work with our stakeholders, our work with our panels as an opportunity to continuously improve special education in our states, and to improve outcomes for our students. And so we have made, alongside this panel, stakeholders in this room, and others, lots of policy shift that I also want to bring back to your mind, in response to the prior two audits, and other stakeholder input as well. We've made a lot of policy shift. Like I said, the last one that we really haven't touched extensively is the one that we talked about earlier today. But we have updated our complaint management procedures, in response to a previous audit and also previous stakeholders, and also an outside opinion that we also commissioned around our dispute resolution processes. So Bulletin 1573, Bulletin 1922, our compliance monitoring procedures, have also been updated. Our team worked really closely with the Office of Special Education Programs as well on getting feedback into some of the policy revisions that our state was interested in, and proposing. Bulletin 1706, we've also made several updates there. A lot of these updates have been responsive to stakeholders, have been responsive to the audits, but also they were about, again, making our processes streamlined, making the special education process more accessible for our parents, therefore our students, and in any way that we can remove any barriers from our school systems who are supporting our students, we want to do that as well. We've made personnel changes as a response to several of the LLA audits. Again, we have new special education attorney at the department. We hired our special education ombudsman, which really also came as a recommendation from our outside review of dispute resolution. There are other states who were engaging in bringing aboard special education ombudsmen. That was a first for our state. Chastity has been here with us now for just over a year, and providing support to our parents and our families. We also have added an additional complaint investigator, and we talked about earlier, we have also added 6 additional team members to our IDA monitoring team. We have done a lot of work with this panel, with our stakeholders and with our LEAs, around really focusing in on inclusive best instructional practices, really leading to a lot of the growth that we are seeing. We have expanded a lot of the support for our new special education directors, making sure that they are coming in prepared to lead special education and to do that work in our state and in their school system. We have done a lot we brought to you all updated assistive technology guidance and a new Louisiana framework for that just over a year ago. So much work have been done, and I want to sincerely express that every piece of input, every piece of feedback is extremely valuable in what steps we take, what shifts that we make to improve special education in our states. This particular audit, as many of you may know, included the academic years of 2015 through 2022. There was some additional requests in this audit that also included some information from 2022-23 and 23-24. So also the last 2 recent years were also added to some of the data that you see in some of the data charts in the report. This particular audit evaluated the oversight and the use of seclusion and restraint. And it also looked at very specifically, some of our Louisiana legislation around those items and around abuse allegations, a lot of the mandatory reporting requirements as well. So I wanted to pull out, just some of the pertinent legislation that was discussed in this particular audit report. I think one that will be, of course, really interest of you all will be revised statute 17416, which is the revised statute that covers our seclusion and restraint law in our state. The definitions, policy, procedure, responsibilities of LDOE, what are our current responsibilities, and then those LEA responsibilities around seclusion and restraint as well. So I wanted to pull those out in case anyone wanted those for reference. So very specifically, the seclusion and restraint law as it is written requires a couple of very specific things of the department. So every year we have to publish annually the data around seclusion and restraint. We also have to maintain a database. And so our LEAs, we maintain that database through our special education reporting system, where LEAs report those incidents to us, and that's how we pull that data and then turn it into a state report. This particular report, I wanted to pull out all of the matters for legislative consideration that I thought some of you may want to talk through. This was also presented at Bessie, and it was also addressed again at their legislative committee at the last Bessie meeting in January. And the chair of that committee actually made a motion and was supported to address these items, the concerns in this report, in legislation this legislative cycle. And so I wanted to share that with you all in case you weren't tuned in to Bessie, that there was a motion to address and work with our legislative committee on these matters for consideration. So matters for legislative consideration 1, and this was a really unique report. Our other reports really didn't have any suggestions or recommendations to go to the legislature and make any changes, whereas this report had some very specific, several legislative changes that possibly need to be addressed per LLA in this particular report. So the first one said that the legislature may wish to consider amending state law giving the LDOE explicit authority to monitor school systems' use of seclusion and restraint. So we do a lot of IDA monitoring in our school systems. Seclusion and restraint is not a requirement as part of IDA, right? So that's not a part of any IDA protocol. There are a lot of precedents to that. Like we monitor a lot for behavior plans, positive behavior supports, behavior intervention plans. Are those being implemented appropriately? So those are all things that are really preceding getting to that point of an incident occurring. But this particular item calls for specific monitoring authority for seclusion and restraint. The second one said that the legislature may wish to consider requiring LDOE to develop a process to verify the accuracy of the number of seclusion and restraint incidents. We are certainly willing to do better, to do more. We have been implementing a process to verify this data, but one of the things that we talked about with LLA and with stakeholders for school systems that are reporting zeros, to make specific calls, make specific outreach to make sure, was it something that was forgotten? Is this an accurate zero? And so we are certainly committed to making sure that our data is accurate and transparent. The third matter for legislative consideration was to clarify the state law to require LDOE to review seclusion and restraint policies that we collect. So currently, the law gives us the authority to collect those. So this particular item talks about requiring us to review those. Matter for legislative consideration 4 says the legislature may wish to consider us, LDOE, to collect and review the mandatory reporting policies, so similar to 3. So we collect mandatory reporting policies and also review them. And then there were 4 additional ones. The legislature may wish to consider granting Bessie the authority to develop a code of ethics allowing for sanctions for behavior that does not rise to criminal conviction. So that really gets into teacher certification And that's certainly something that the Bessie Legislative Committee is going to look at and figure out, is there anything else that we have authority to do in addition to what we already do? The legislature may wish to consider requiring school systems to notify LGOE when they dismiss employees for student abuse or unethical conduct, regardless of conviction status. Again, that one would likely be considered with MLC number 5 as well, as part of certification and employee conduct. Matter for legislative consideration 7. Legislature may wish to clarify the state law to require LGOE to review school systems' fed camera policies. So again, we already collect those policies, but requiring LDOE to review those. And then matter for legislative consideration 8. The legislature may wish to consider requiring school systems to notify parents on their website of their right to request cameras in self-contained classrooms. And so adding that. So that's why I put the 3 different revised statutes up there. So some of this would amend the seclusion and restraint law, and then some are specific to, there are a couple specific to special education cameras in classrooms. And so again, just want to give you all the platform to have any discussion. Of course, want to take public comment. But also knowing that Bessie has also committed and made a motion to work on this with the legislature for this cycle, to make any updates here that are responsive and that are needed. And overwhelmingly, the comments, just to kind of summarize, the emails that I've shared with our seat members as well, all very supportive, of course, of making sure kids are safe, making sure kids are in safe learning environments. And supporting addressing these particular recommendations. So I'll stop here. If there are any other questions or clarifying things, I don't want to go so deep that maybe some of you have already heard this. I know we've discussed this at Developmental Disability Council. They graciously allowed me to address this on their agenda as well. So if you have any specific questions about the report, certainly I'll entertain those, and then any comments around anything else that you would like to be on public record. Just to remind you all, I can't, LGOE employees are not going to be able to support, be pro. Bessie will be able to take positions on legislation or any proposed legislations, but any of the LGOE employees will have to sort of abstain, give you all the opportunity to discuss and talk about this topic, which is extremely important. But just know that I don't want you to think that I'm being dismissive or non-participatory, but I can't in any way say, I support this language or change here, just so you all know. But I want you to have the opportunity to have some discussion about this item.
Any questions or discussion from the panel?
Oh, go ahead. So in your database collection, is it specific names of individuals that you collect, or you just collecting the number of incidents?
No, so there's a bit of information that we collect. Actually, everything that's kind of outlined in the way the law is currently written, we ask for that information. The information is tied to the specific student, and it's tied to their that student's special education record. And so an individual with the school system, an administrator will go in, a teacher will go in, report that incident within that student's IEP record. They will record the date, the time. There are requirements for them to observe that student during that incident and report on that. We collect who the individuals that are there and present and witnessing that incident. So there's a bit of information. It's not just numbers, but we do report in terms of here are the number of incidences, but we do have individual details about what happened during that incident.
I just wanted to share that there's several groups that have been working, I guess over about the last month or so, to secure a legislator to bring some legislation to address several of the areas in this particular audit finding. So the Developmental Disabilities Council, Disability Rights Louisiana, and the ARC of Louisiana have been working together to amend the restraint seclusion legislation. And within that legislation, we have been working to address the issues around the cameras in the special education classrooms. So I have a draft of the draft legislation. We're hoping it'll drop later this week. But it specifically addresses MLC 1, MLC 3, 7, and 8. It's could possibly address MLC 2. I'm not 100% sure there, but I think we do touch on it. So we are going to give the department the explicit authority to monitor and also look at and review their policies. And so they will review them once, and then anytime there is any change to the revised statute, we will give them, they will have the authority to then again review those policies to ensure that the districts have come into compliance with the changes. We also are looking at creating crisis management teams. This is a strategy that several other states use. We pulled both from Florida and Arkansas. And it is going to be a district requirement for the schools to identify the personnel to be a part of these teams and go through very specific trainings, which will be outlined in the bill and specifically identified, and complete that training. It's an 8-hour training that then they can sort of train the trainer. Once you've got a set group of people, we're hoping that they will then trickle down into other school personnel, but each school will have a specific group of people that are extra trained and certified in appropriate CIT training, trauma-enforced, practices, much larger than just positive behavior intervention and supports. With relation to we've also made some adjustments around eliminating the use of mechanical restraint, elimination of seclusion rooms and the practice of seclusion, and change some minor things around what is considered the time, like just holding a student from 5 minutes down to 3 minutes. And also reducing the number, if like a student has, I think right in current law, it's like 5 incidences of seclusion or restraint, you sort of force the special education director to get involved in review. We've reduced that, I think, from 5 to 3 as well. And I'm probably missing some stuff, but with relation to cameras, how we're looking at MLC 7 and 8 is we're just going to require that the districts that have not installed cameras in special education classrooms use the funding that they've already been allocated and requiring them to install them, regardless of parental request. After discussion, I don't know if anybody watched the Select Committee on Women and Children, but there was a very lengthy, hours-long conversation around what is the deal with districts not installing cameras. They've heard from parents that when they make a request, the school district has denied their request, which is just mind-boggling to me. I've recently worked with a parent in Livingston Parish that went through this, saying that the incident was not an incident that warranted the installation of a camera. So just to resolve all of that, I know the department agrees with the cameras. The money's been allocated, sort of remove the administrative burden on them with this request and this paperwork, just install the cameras. So that will, I think, address 7 and 8. We have had conversations with the department. I'm not saying they support, but I think we are in agreement with where the language is. I think everybody's in agreement. We made some, like, we conceded on some things. They did as well to sort of meet, in the middle. We have not shared this with districts, with the school boards charter. We're just trying to get it drafted before the pre-file deadline, which I think is Friday. This Friday, I think it's this Friday. So I'm trying to just go through real quick and see if I missed anything major in this legislation.
Ashley, could I also maybe have a recommendation too?
Yeah.
With what you're proposing of having that specific language for training and de-escalation for that team? Because I think that's very important when you have such, a crisis team in place, that those individuals are well aware of some of the behaviors maybe of maybe children with autism or any number of exceptionality or disability, but then having that, I guess, knowledge of de-escalation and what that looks like.
That's a requirement with this law. We also wanted to make sure that any student that was coming out of a physical restraint was visited by the school nurse to look at them for, any distress, marks, whatever that may have occurred during. And so we weren't specific in there about what that looked like, if that meant the nurse just happened to come into the room and observe the student, didn't want to disrupt the student. If they were calmed down, maybe removing them from the classroom might cause some additional disruption. So just how it's best for the student to be observed by the school nurse. And then we also are going to ask the schools, the districts, to report to the SEACs and provide the SEACs with two different things. The guidelines and procedures developed by around restraint and seclusion, that has to be submitted to the SEACs. And then there was one other thing that we asked to go to the special education advisory committees, and I can't remember off the top of my head. But as soon as it does get, everybody agrees, it gets drafted and it gets dropped, any changes that need to be made, if we want to send it out to the group, I think that would be great, so everybody could review. But I really think that it is a huge step. I don't think it covers necessarily 100% of everything, but it's a lot. It's a lot of changes. It's a huge step towards additional training and developing teams that can respond in crisis situations, that have additional trainings and knowledge around, more than just PBIS. And I'm hearing it from parents, I'm hearing it from teachers. They are just overwhelmed in classrooms, and they want this as much as parents want it. So I think that covers the majority of it, but it really has been a group effort between the council, Disability Rights Louisiana, and the ARC working on it.
Thanks,
Any other
Ashley, for that. Yeah.
Comments?
I know we have some public comments as well, but anything else from the panel?
We did. It's not. So we clarified the definition of seclusion and seclusion room, and it's very clearly spelled out what is and what isn't. So if there is the use of a sensory room or some additional room, throughout the day for, like, my son, if he would to get overwhelmed, we would remove him, go on a walk, go here, give him, like, he loved to do things. He loved to feel like he was a part of something and wanted, so they would give him like a fake stack of papers. Hey, go bring this to the principal. Like, get him out of the room just to sort of de-escalate for a minute. And then, the transition wasn't, he didn't think he was in trouble. He didn't think he was going somewhere that he didn't want to go. So none of that practice is even in question. Like, that is still something that schools can use. It's just the more restrictive practice of seclusion. I know I've worked with parents over the years that these schools built seclusion rooms for their children. That stuff is what we're trying to eliminate, and mechanical restraint as well.
Miss Ashley, you said you're going to share the information so that we can.
As soon as we get the approval and once it's dropped, then I'll send the link so everybody can look at the legislation.
Any other comments from the panel? Okay, we'll go to public comments now. Mutan. Gladys? Gladden?
That's perfect. Actually, will you come to this mic right here just so we can make sure everyone online can hear? And we'll do 3 minutes for public comment. Just push it on, Miss Gladys, if you will. Hold on.
Oh, God, I turned it off. Sorry. Good morning. My name is Gladys Mouton, and I am here to express concerns regarding the issue of seclusion and restraint practices in Louisiana schools and to support the recommendations of the board. As the parent of a child with a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder and an educational professional, I'm deeply concerned about the lack of comprehensive and transparent auditing of seclusion and restraint data. Without proper auditing and accountability, we can't ensure the safety, dignity, and rights of students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Definitely looked at the clock and lost my space. Who are disproportionately affected by these practices. Furthermore, without proper auditing and accountability, we can't assess training needs of educators or offer support that will allow educators to serve their students in ways that aren't harmful. Although I have been considered a teacher leader, a mentor teacher coach, and currently serve as an administrator in my district, my child has not been exempt from inappropriate restraint or exclusionary practices. This was devastating because as an educator, I pour my heart into making students feel safe and providing a high quality education. This experience opened my eyes and highlighted the need for leaders at the state level to take action. With all of my education, my proximity to district leaders, and my big voice when it comes to advocating for kids, my own child was victimized. I speak out because I don't want this to happen to other kids. And I also speak out because I recognize how LA Gator will undoubtedly impact our schools if students with special needs continue to be mistreated and parents are given better options to educate their children while keeping them safe. I strongly support the recommendation to allocate funding for a full audit of Louisiana's Department of Education seclusion and restraint data. I feel like this audit is essential to promoting statewide accountability, and it's critical to identifying gaps in the reporting of different incidents. I do want to thank you all for your continued efforts to uphold the needs and the interests of our students with exceptionalities. Your support makes a meaningful difference in shaping safe and inclusive educational environments for our children so that they can all be, I wrote down some notes. I don't see the timer. I'm going to talk faster.
It's okay. We couldn't get it. You got 42. You're good.
I wrote down notes regarding the student performance increasing because I do want to lift up how important it is for those special ed students, including the ones that have some comorbidities with autism, to be in the classroom so they can tap into that high quality curriculum and instruction. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Audrey?
Good morning. My name is Audrey Gillum, and I live in Caddo Parish. It is in the city of Shreveport with my two daughters. My oldest daughter is Kira, who is 9 years old, who has autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, and sensory processing disorder. My other daughter, Kamora, has autism and she has ADHD. Thank you for hearing me out this morning and listening to me share my journey and the issues that I have. I am here to ask that you improve seclusion and restraint policies. The state general funding to cover the costs of the monitoring of the schools and restraint policies. Additionally, please require that all schools install cameras in all special ed classrooms without parents having to specifically request them. Because I've requested a camera in the classroom, and when the school year started, my child was moved. Seclusion as a means of discipline in schools is a practice that needs to be eliminated. There is no data to support the idea of seclusion as beneficial to the students. The fact studies have shown that loneliness and social isolation as associated with a higher risk of health problems, especially mental health. My daughter is a self-harmer. She would headbutt her head, hit herself, and punch out windows. Last year, my daughter had been restrained for the first time. She came home and would not stop tantruming, and she bust out a window in our home. I feel that this would this would also like I would also like to see all schools to use future funding they receive from previous years to install the cameras in special ed classrooms without parents having to go through the process requesting these. The funding is there. We should go ahead and use it to install those cameras for our kids as well as our staff. Because I'm a paraprofessional in Caddo Parish. It will protect all of us. Please support families like my girls and I both as the families as well of school staff as being all of these things. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you.
Samantha Reed.
Samantha. Morning.
I didn't plan to cry.
Well, no, none of us plan to. It's okay.
I went over this 100 times, and it's like, this doesn't happen at home. All right, I'm a mom of a high schooler with autism and a 6-year-old with Down syndrome. My name is Samantha Reed. I'm out of Livingston Parish.
At Livingston?
Mhm.
Is that your little guy right there?
One of them. The other one's about 6'7". He's tall, 15. All right, let me get started. I'm sorry. In October 2023, Asher, who is nonverbal and has Down syndrome and has had VSD corrective surgery, heart surgery, was injured at school, and it could have been very detrimental to his physical well-being. No reports were filed by the school, the hospital, nor the pediatrician. All of them failed him. There's also no, oh, nervous. Why am I so nervous? Okay, sorry. There's also no video footage. There was no accountability or acknowledgement of our concerns for Asher's injuries from the school administration or classroom staff. Starting that same week and the following week, we discovered several bruises all over his body, including fingerprints. Really, indicative of restraint. This is the first time I've publicly spoken about this. These bruises were at different stages of healing, proving that the restraints had occurred multiple times. We didn't find out about his internal injuries until August 11th of 2024 that occurred in October of 2023. Even the doctors didn't give us the notes or the internal injury information. Later, we uncovered that the school was not even following its own policies regarding meal prescription forms, something critical for Asher's health and well-being. This neglect demonstrated a clear disregard for Asher's safety and rights. Louisiana law provides guidelines for the use of restraint and seclusion in public schools, particularly for special needs students, yet Asher's case illustrates a disturbing failure to adhere to these protections. According to the Louisiana Revised Statutes, 17 RS 17 4 1621, restraint and seclusion should only be used when a student possesses an imminent risk of harm, and schools are required to document and report such incidents to parents. This was not done in Asher's case. Furthermore, the AFFIRM Act seeks to ensure transparency, accountability, and protection for students with disabilities in schools. It emphasizes the necessity of proper documentation and parental notification regarding the use of restraint or seclusion, prohibiting the use of restraint and seclusion as disciplinary measures, ensuring that all school personnel are trained in de-escalation techniques and alternative behavioral interventions. Based on our experience, Asher School violated these fundamental protections. The absence of reports, failure to provide video footage, and lack of transparency regarding Asher's injuries constitute neglect and abuse under Louisiana law. The physical evidence of restraint, coupled with the school's noncompliance with their own policy, suggests a systematic failure that must be addressed. May I continue?
Yes, I'd also like to speak with you after, please. Yes, please.
I have like 2 paragraphs left. I'm sorry.
Sure.
We are calling for an independent investigation into the treatment of Asher's and the handling of special needs students in Louisiana public schools. Schools must be held accountable for failing to protect our most vulnerable children. No parent should have to fight this hard to simply ensure their child's safety and dignity, or feel as if our family safety is at risk due to a direct, verbal, veiled threat from the school board. Everything we have said today pertaining Asher's case is on record via email, photos, paper, and audio recordings. The LDOE has had all of this information since January 14th, and they have been silent. I urge lawmakers, educators, parents to push for full enforcement of the AFFIRM Act, to increase oversight of restraints and seclusion practices, and stronger consequences for the schools that fail to comply with established protections. Also, that the teachers and school staff be trained properly for all disabilities and diagnosis in regular ed and sped ed classrooms, and that those trainings be heavily enforced. Asher and so many others like him deserve better. Possibly also consider more inclusive clubs and sports with schools, particularly high school. Last paragraph, I'm sorry. You can help, and we believe you can, to allocate the appropriate funds to cover cost of the monitoring of the school's restraint policies. Give LDOE the authority to monitor restraint policies. Additionally, it requires that Livingston Parish and all schools to automatically install cameras with audio year-round in all sped classrooms without request, as they failed to do so by written request for Asher. Cameras would also ensure the account of incidents or injuries reported or not reported are accurate and true. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the extra time, and all of you have done a great job this morning up here.
Thank you.
Kelly Yates.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to be here to speak on seclusion and restraint policies. My name is Kelly Yates, and I'm the parent of multiple special needs children. But today I'm here to discuss my 11-year-old child in the Tangier Parish school system. My daughter's educational journey has been nothing short of difficult. She has spent more days home, secluded from school, 135 days to be exact, between this year and last year, when she should be in a class learning. She's been restrained 4 times too many as a means of discipline when behaviors escalated and compliance on her part was unattainable. This has negatively affected my child in the form of loneliness, sadness, confusion, and anger. Each time the restraint is used, it causes a period of school refusal because she can't understand why this is happening to her. School should be a place of learning, trust, enrichment, and wonderful social experiences with friends, but it has been nothing but that. Not only has it affected her, but it has also impacted my family. I gave up a 23-year career as a paralegal that I absolutely loved. It's impossible to hold a job when a child is unable to attend school due to repeated use of seclusion. The amount of time I've spent stressing about how my daughter if she'll be able to have a successful school day, if I'll be called to pick her up, or if today will result in another instance of restraint or exclusion is immeasurable. Most importantly, I'm unable to provide additional resources to my child that any working family would be able to access due to the financial impact that this presents. I'm requesting that the Louisiana Department of Education remove seclusion as a means of discipline. There is no data to support the idea that seclusion is beneficial to students, and in fact, I can attest firsthand to the loneliness, social isolation that seclusion causes. I'm requesting that the Louisiana Department of Education obtain legal authority to monitor policies on restraint. There have been incidents where restraint has been used on my child, where paperwork was not provided in a timely manner, even after I've requested it countless times, which is a clear violation of the policies that they should be following. I request each school district provide training to all school personnel authorized to use positive behavior interventions and crisis intervention training pursuant to school district policy, and that the training be held annually to ensure that we're using the best methods to support all vulnerable children. Finally, I request that the schools use the funding that they received in the previous years to install cameras in all special education classrooms. In summation, I'm pleading with the board to secure funds to cover the cost of monitoring the school's restraint policies and to give the Louisiana Department of Education the authority to monitor restraint policies and accurate seclusion reporting, and to require that all schools install cameras in all SPED classrooms without request. Thank you very much for your time.
Riley?
Yeah, hello, y'all. I'm Riley Marine, Asher Marine's dad. I do not believe that any of these children should go through a lot of the things that they go through. Um, but it's really hard to see how devastating it will really be in their future in the long run to what they're going through right now with some of the seclusions and restraints. I do think there needs to be alternative motive or alternative to it. It does need to be changed. I can't imagine what my son's going through, being nonverbal, not able to defend himself, to protect himself. Everybody, I do agree with a lot that I heard today. A lot of the parents are very concerned and very educated. I didn't write nothing down today. I thought I was going to be able to handle it. Not going to be able to handle it. I believe my wife has said it really qualified enough to get it across a little bit more than I think I probably could. I do support the full mandate. I would really like to require more of a mandated camera system inside with audio on 2 sides of the classroom, 2 corners of the classroom, personally myself, because one camera can't see all the way around the whole classroom for any incidents or accidents or any other things may have been involved, and or out in the playgrounds, because children do fall and have accidents, and then they come home and the parents have concerns, and or hallways or cafeterias. That's how I feel about it, and I can't ask my son what's going on. So the only way for him to have a voice would to actually have a camera to give him that voice for his freedom. His rights were taken from him. His liberties were taken from him, and I believe his dignity was taken from him. And I really appreciate y'all's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other public comment cards? No? Card?
Yeah, please. Oh, look, Ashley has it. We'll get you a card.
Good morning. My name is Odell Wilmer Jr., and I am a parent of a child that has spectrum autism disorder. When she attended school in November of 2023 for the first time, there were things she was doing at home, and when she started attending school, she stopped doing them. So we knew something was going on at school that wasn't supposed to be happening. Later, you all aware if a child has diarrhea, they have to be out of school for at least 24 hours. Well, that was one of the things they were using. Come to find out, she wasn't having diarrhea. So I support the fact that you all need to put cameras in the school system, in these children's classroom, regardless if I agree or any other parent agree, because it will protect both sides. I'm not here to point the finger at who's doing right or who's doing wrong, because right is right and wrong is wrong. I just pray that we find a solution to where both parties can feel comfortable. A teacher can feel comfortable going to school and providing my child with the services that she needs, and she's not afraid of doing something that she's not supposed to do, and she may end up losing her job, and now she can't take care of her family. Or my child not being able to come home and express to me why they're not able to do something because of fear that if they tell me, I may go to the school and say something, and then she's afraid to go into the classroom. I heard a lot of positive information today, and life is about changing and moving in the right direction, and I feel that we are all doing that today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with no other public comments, would we like to move forward with this legislative audit report, accepting this report?
We have a motion to receive, and we have a second. Are there any oppositions? I don't think there would be.
No oppositions? Okay. All right, that will carry.
And that concludes our agenda. I just want to thank the panel and thank all of our members of the public who came, parents, everybody who's supporting. We can't do this work. We can't make change. We can't move forward without everyone at the table and really hearing and understanding that feedback, that support, and just staying absolutely committed to making sure that all of our kids are successful and go to supportive learning environments every single day. And we are certainly committed to that, and we'll stay moving in that direction. I agree with many of those public comments. I believe that we are moving in the right direction. I think there are solutions on the table, and I just really appreciate everybody's time today. I appreciate the presence in the room and the reminder right in front of me of why we do this every single day. And we hope everybody has a great end to the school year. I know it's a busy time of year, and we will see everyone back. Our summer meeting is June 18th, and we'll see everybody back here for that meeting. We appreciate you guys, and a motion to adjourn. Rebecca, and a second.
Second. Thank you.
Ash.